is no set time for how long a baby needs to be on CPAP. Sometimes it is for a few days. Sometimes it can be for longer than a week.
They need to reach a point where they are able to breathe for themselves without assistance, and that varies from baby to baby.
A baby is ready to start the process of weaning off CPAP when they are clinically stable. They must have a respiratory rate of less than 60 breaths per minute. Their oxygen saturation should be greater than 90%. They should have no significant signs of increased work of breathing or respiratory distress. A baby might have been on bubbleCPAP for a week or more before this criteria is reached. At this point, we need to gradually wean them off CPAP by reducing the treatment one step at a time. We cannot just stop it suddenly. After each step, we need to monitor and assess to make sure that they are coping with the reduced treatment and getting enough oxygen and air into their lungs. If not, then we need to wait for them to stabilize before taking the next step. Each step is at least 4 hours apart.
This is important. 4 hours is the minimum that you would wait to move on to the next step. Often it takes longer than this.
The weaning process is summarized in the weaning off CPAP algorithm. So, the first question to ask is whether the baby meets the weaning criteria. If not, keep them on CPAP at the current settings. The second question is whether the FiO2 is more than 50%. If it is, then the first stage will be to gradually reduce the FiO2 until it reaches 50%. It should be reduced by 10% every 4 hours. Let's take as an example a baby who is on 90% FiO2 with 7 centimeters of water in the bottle. This is a high level of treatment. At present, on the CPAP machine, the total flow is 6 liters per minute, and the oxygen flow is 5 liters per minute. We start by reducing the FiO2 by 10%. The blending table shows we need to reduce the oxygen flow rate to 4.5 liters per minute to bring the FiO2 down to 80%. The baby has now taken her first step down in the weaning process.
Remember, each time that you make a change, you need to monitor 15 minutes later to make sure that baby's saturation levels have not gone down or they are showing increased work of breathing. If they are, then you should reverse the step and wait at least another 4 hours.
The next step down will be to an FiO2 of 70%. Again, the blending table shows us that this requires reducing the oxygen flow meter to 4 liters per minute. Then, 4 hours later, we go to 60% FiO2, which means bringing the flow rate down to 3.5 liters per minute, and then to 50% with an oxygen flow rate of 3 liters per minute. Throughout this time, we do not change the level of water in the bottle. We have now gone down 4 times, monitoring 15 minutes after each step. This will have taken a minimum of 16 hours. We are ready for the second stage of weaning. Once you reach 50% FiO2, the next stage is to reduce the oxygen flow rate and the level of water in the bottle alternately every 4 hours. You do this until you reach 20% FiO2 and the water is at 5 centimeters. So let's go back to our example. This will be the next steps down. First, the FiO2 to 40%, then the water to 6 centimeters, then the FiO2 to 30%, and next the water to 5 centimeters, and finally the FiO2 to 20%. We have reached the minimum CPAP settings. Of course, this is dependent on the baby continuing to meet the weaning criteria. If at any time their breathing rate, saturation level, or work of breathing gets significantly worse, then you need to wait until they improve. You might even need to reverse the process until they cope. So let's see the second stage. Again, this time on the CPAP, 40% FiO2 requires 2.5 liters per minute of oxygen. Then use your syringe and catheter tubing to take out 1 centimeter of water. Then the oxygen flow rate goes to 1 liter per minute, and the water down to 5 centimeters. And finally, the FiO2 to 20%, with the oxygen flow meter showing 0. So with this example, the whole process has taken a minimum of 36 hours, allowing the baby to gradually adapt.
It should be noted that it can take longer than this to wean a baby off CPAP. However, with some babies who responded quickly to treatment, it will take less time. The important thing is that the steps in the weaning process are always led by the baby's clinical condition.
The steps will, of course, vary slightly depending on where you start. For example, if there were 6 centimeters of water in the bottle when you started weaning, you will reach 5 centimeters, the lowest setting, while still at 40% FiO2. In which case you keep the water at 5 centimeters while carrying on with reductions of the FiO2 every 4 hours until you get to 20%. When you reach the minimum settings, leave the baby for 4 more hours to make sure they are still stable. Check the respiratory rate is less than 60 breaths per minute. Their oxygen saturation is more than 90%, and they have no significantly increased work of breathing or other signs of respiratory distress. And then you are ready to take the baby off the machine.